The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola, Blowout, Brian De Palma, even 3 Days of the Condor. At one point, I even argued that The Exorcist itself was a metaphor that for the faltering belief in the American dream, that the actual girl who was possessed was a metaphor for the body politic, and the priest's loss of faith was actually a metaphor for the loss of faith in the American dream, which followed the assassination of John Kennedy in Dallas, and later Nixon's impeachment, the first time I think a president had been impeached, in the Watergate crisis. And this brought a very severe questioning of the American dream. And I found it interesting when I thought about it quite recently, that there was a kind of conflict, or maybe it was a cross narratives in cinema of the time. In 1977, we had the first Star Wars movie, not the first in the series, but the first one that was released chronologically. And it is entitled Star Wars: A New Hope. And I found that very interesting, and the fact that you could read Star Wars as based on a very kind of familiar, almost Western, American film, Western type narrative. And so it's interesting to see the conflict of those two different, one pessimistic and one more contrived optimistic narrative. And if there are several resources I've given you, if you watch Adam Curtis's Hypernormalization, you'll see how this myth of American democracy, America as the beacon of freedom of the world, was actually created by a right-wing think tank, and then released into the spectacle, and for a long time had a profound effect. Also, the war or the nuclear threat from Russia was vastly overemphasized, even though they really knew basically that Russia was on its knees. I mean, the proof was that when the Berlin Wall came down, we actually discovered how dire the situation was in what was the USSR and today the Soviet Union. So the idea of hyperstition comes from a group of philosophers who were at Warwick in the late 90s and early 2000s, including Nick Land, Sadie Plant, and Mark Fisher. Were the main leading proponents of this. And I'm focusing mostly on this bit on Nick Land's early work, Thirst for Annihilation, and Fang Noumena, his piece Meltdown, and work with the CCRU, Lemurian Time War, and that period. Okay, Nick Land argues that capitalism embodies hyperstitional dynamics itself, merging with technology to create a feedback loop that accelerates change and subverts established norms. I'm very interested in the way that capitalism moves, it does in terms deterritorialize everything and fragments belief systems, values, even the sense of society and the collective, and leaves individual isolated consumers. This perspective sees capitalism and AI as intertwined, pushing society towards unpredictable futures and challenging conventional narratives about progress and control. I mean, ultimately, Land sees capitalism and AI as the same thing, that capitalism is actually AI, and it is a autonomous program that is sentient in its own way and is kind of determined to bring about its own fulfillment with the creation of a superintelligence, mainly an AI system, which is a much higher intelligence than us. That links into my work by this kind of, again, very much like the 70s, we're sitting on a crisis and a choice, which may not seem much of a choice with the way that the climate change is approaching. Predictions, the most pessimistic prediction is we have possibly 80 years left living at this kind of standard, this kind of societal standard. Vast parts of the world will become unsustainable, then uninhabitable, and that will lead to mass migration, conflict over scarce resources, and ultimately a drop in the world's population to something like pre-industrial levels. The good news, on the other hand, if we manage to get quantum computing going, which could be the next 5, 7, 10 years, and there's no timeline on actual proper AI, not the kind of machine learning programs that you have on kind of ChatGPT-4, which are a different form of AI. We're talking about AI that has sentient consciousness, which I'll talk more about in a minute. With those, we could actually solve some of the problems that we are facing, but without those, it looks quite bleak. But within that comes the danger that, well, if we do have these programs that are more sentient, more intelligent than us, will they be particularly charitable towards us? Or are we going to see a merging of the human with the AI to produce something which is halfway between? Is it going to be a next stage of evolution, or will we cease to exist and the form of machine AI is the next stage of evolution? So, Land's concept of hyperstition challenges traditional notions of time. And this is quite interesting because time itself is a construct. So if I asked you the question, free will or predetermination, and it's a trick question, but the answer to the question is neither, because both of them are based on an inaccurate assessment of what actually time is. Time doesn't run in a linear fashion, past, present, future. That's just a construct which comes out of consciousness. So once we take away time as it's not fundamental, and it seems that space isn't fundamental either. Both of these are constructs of our consciousness. So once we take away those, it opens up thinking in a very dramatic and interesting manner. It says that hyperstitions create their own temporal realities. Ideas once believed manifest into reality, effectively altering the past, present, and future. This concept implies that time is not linear, but can be manipulated by narratives that project from the future back into the present, creating asynchronous timelines. Hyperstition thus positions time as a construct influenced by cultural and speculative narratives rather than fixed sequence of events. Hyperstitions, then maybe, this is a metaphor, time-traveling devices, altering perceptions and periodically reshaping historical consciousness. Now, this aligns with a broader philosophical narrative that values, hold on, is that the right? Here we are. Sorry. So then I link this to briefly to quantum mechanics. Basically, a quantum mechanic theory called cubism, which is Q, capital B, ism, which stands for quantum Bayesianism. Hyperstition intersects with quantum mechanics physics in its speculative nature, suggesting that belief and narrative can influence reality, akin to quantum mechanics and the observer effect, where observation affects outcomes. So abstract concepts or observations can lead to tangible changes in reality. The world is not divisible in terms of subject and object, and this ties into kind of the post-humanist idea. It is a participator in a very deep sense. Action brings about creation. In Bayesian terms, probabilities are treated as subjective degrees of belief, and that aligns to Bayesian probability theory. Everything in the universe is different from everything else. Every moment is a moment of creation. Difference is the main ontological concept. The universe creates the observer. The participatory act creates information, which then creates the universe. This was the idea of the physicist John Wheeler, who was a precursor to the work that John Fuchs has done on cubism. And then it links to Deleuze's approach. John Fuchs does actually mention Deleuze in his talks, so it's a link that he's made and I've picked up on. So Deleuze's approach to art emphasizes its role as the creator of sensations, independent of traditional subject-object relations. Art for Deleuze is an autonomous being of sensation existing independently of the artist and the audience. It operates via percepts and affects, which are non-representational and self-sufficient. Deleuze views art as carving out territories from chaos. This aligns to his broader philosophy that values creativity and difference, seeing art as a means to express dynamic forces in life and nature, liberating virtual potentials from actualization. Fluid and dynamic, it's a fluid and dynamic understanding of aesthetics. So I'll give an example of how things change and movement and flux in Deleuze's terms and converge into something new. For example, how TV in itself became Netflix. It's a confluence of many different events and ideas and things. The telegraph, the military development of the internet, phone lines, coding and microchips, all of these things orbiting come together in an amalgamation to make something new. And that's an example of how this Deleuzean process works. A quote from Deleuze: "The more that living matter complexifies, the more it transforms this virtual into spontaneous action and unforeseen moments." Rancière criticizes Deleuze's idea of becoming imperceptible. And one entry point I thought very good for this was the quote from The Usual Suspects, which said, "Greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist." Deleuze, myself, I would see the role of the artist as nomadic, completely transformative. So one body of work then changes or can change when it's different manifestations, whether it's in a book, a gallery, or on the internet. The idea of an artist having a signature style is both redundant and open to what Deleuze would call state capture. Once you have a signature style, it's very easy to be commodified, codified, and then you're part of the capitalist system. Your work becomes a commodity. And you can think of it, unfortunately, a lot of artists now are judged on their marketability, their value, rather than the content of their work itself. But you can see this as a rather wider trend in that businesses, somebody like Tesco, is judged on its share value. How it appears on the market is the most important thing, and a share dividend, rather than the actual content of the organization itself, quality of product, customer services, efficiency, etc., are all secondary or marginally important. The most important thing is the image and how it appears, and obviously flows of money, the stock market, share values are, well, nebulous in terms of they're a representation of something, but not essentially real. And certainly with Tesco in the past years, they were caught out by lying about their share dividend, and there was actually a massive black hole in their finances. Right, at this point I'm going to introduce Joshua Back's ideas on consciousness, basically in order to give a different approach to how actually these hyperstitional ideas and how images can be transferred from person to person and affect society. So Joshua Back sees the world that we touch is not the physical world. What we touch is a representation in our own mind. So Joshua Back sees consciousness as a product of the brain's learning mechanisms, essential for creating coherent models of reality. He sees it as an information processing phenomena rather than a metaphysical reality. So the question would be for the image maker, if you're living in a simulation and you are a virtual idea of what your brain thinks a person would look like, living in a simulation of what the brain thinks the world look like, with maybe sort of 5% of reality is, you're only perceiving 5% of reality. So if you're in a simulation and your brain is creating a simulation of a person in a virtual, think of it as almost like virtual game, really. How does that affect the images that we make? Because we're in a virtual simulation that our brain creates of reality, and then we're taking pictures of something or making pictures which are pictures of a virtual simulation. And then that adds, I don't know the answer to this, this adds just another layer onto the kind of Baudrillard's hyperreal simulacrum problem, or representation of the spectacle today. So in Joshua Back's ideas, consciousness is virtual, and the mind creates a simulation of a person who cares of what it would be like to be a person in the world. We then use the output of the simulation to drive the behavior of the organism, that's us. So you and I are the content of a simulation in a trance-like state, believing this dream that your brain is generating about reality. So experience is being represented as if it was real. We experience phenomena in the same way that characters in a novel experience phenomena, because it's being written into the novel by the author, our minds. So we exist in a story. What feels real is only a simulacrum. Consciousness is a simulated property of a simulated system. And physical systems cannot be conscious, only a simulation can be conscious. So Bax also suggests that ideas like religion and God function more like unifying narratives or cognitive constructs that span multiple minds. Think of it as a kind of a software program that can span multiple systems, multiple substrates simultaneously. Individuals can together form an agent at the next level of description. This agent is sentient, this is the idea, the idea is sentient, and has a relationship to the world around it and a relationship to its constituent parts. So Bach extends this with a concept called cyber-animism, which suggests that nature may consist of self-organizing software agents similar to spirits in ancient belief systems. So consciousness is a software running on a brain, similar to programs that exist. Similar programs exist also in plants and ecosystems. So he's really saying that what we are is a software program running on a primate brain, with then another layer of programming running on the top, which is consciousness, which is a coherence function, which pulls everything together and makes it seem like there's a linear timeline. One thing follows another. Basically, it's functional so that we can do things. So now I'm going to talk about Quatermass. The reason I'm talking about the 70s, again, is because I think 70s there was a great ideological divide between, especially at the beginning, between collectivism, socialism, and monetarism, or what now became capitalism. Forces of deindustrialization. It was a period of significant turbulence, and I see it as very much linking, as I said before, to the period we're living in now, which is equally turbulent. And these periods seem rife with conspiracy, misinformation, disinformation, paranoia, and conspiracies. Again, it's not a new phenomenon. In the Elizabethan age, when England was under threat from Spain because England had become Protestant, again, the system was, but the land was rife with plots, counterplots, false plots, and loads of conspiracy about invasion, some of them false, some of them manufactured by Walsingham, actually, who was the Queen's, well, what do you call it, the head of the Secret Service, I suppose, in today's terms, manufacturing plots. So it's not a new phenomenon, but the medium, in kind of McLuhan's terms, the medium obviously has changed over time. And now we have a greater acceleration of things like that because of the greater degree of information and systems of transference of information. So in the Quatermass 1979 serial explores several key themes. Societal collapse. The series is set in a dystopian future where society's structures have broken down, reflecting anxieties about urban decay and social unrest. In the 70s, Britain especially was decaying and very divided, and it was a process already, in deindustrialization had already begun, but there was no response to it. And there was an argument whether we should subsidize and prop up industry or whether we should just let the markets and the monetary flows decide how the system should play out. And interestingly, by the time we get to about 1984 and a very famous standoff between the miners' strike and the police, by that time I think you're seeing rather amount of cybernetic discharge, in the fact that you might see cybernetics would be seen as a metaphor, would be the heating control in your dwelling place of living, thermostat that works in a negative feedback loop, maintains stability, so it would maintain an ambient temperature. And then as you walk past people's buildings, you see steam discharging out of the side from the boiler. By the time you get 1984 and the end of the miners' strike, the system is discharging. The images that you see, the battle has already been fought, and this is the system. The system was really recalibrating, has recalibrated. The images you're seeing are the discharge cybernetically from the system. So there isn't a real battle, a real conflict. It is more or less an image of discharge. Again, Quatermass, again, youth and cults, the rise of the planet people in the series, a youth cult believing in extraterrestrial salvation symbolizes disillusionment with the contemporary society in a search for meaning. I find it interesting, which I was talking to Helton before, that this plays out on a TV serial in 1979, and then you get kind of a real world manifestation of this 10 years later, in sort of 88, 89, with the beginnings of rave culture, which are not dissimilar in the fact that gatherings of people coming together on a very tribal basis, which is, again, a reaction to the prevailing government idea. Most famously, Margaret Thatcher said there was no such thing as society. And I think Tony Wilson, who was the former, well, what do you call it? The late Tony Wilson, yes, he was the head of Factory Records from Joy Division and Happy Mondays, etc. The Hacienda was the centre in Manchester of the early rave scene. Tony Wilson once said that youth culture is a reaction to the prevailing trend in society, so that this collective idea of coming together in rave was a reaction against the prevailing trend in political terms. I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule, but he did have, it is a useful way of looking at it in some ways. Also in Quatermass, Alien Threats and Human Harvesting, the narrative involves an alien force harvesting humans, critiquing aspects of faith and exploitation. Science and Mysticism, the series juxtaposes scientific inquiry with mythical beliefs, questioning the boundaries between rationality and superstition. Interestingly, the serial uses megalithic sites to explore themes of ancient mysteries by serving as a focal point for the disappearance of the planet people. These youth gatherings, they gather around the circles, and then it's never explicitly shown in the program, but it's implied that they are, in quotes, harvested by an extraterrestrial force. These prehistoric stone circles, like Ringstone Round, which is the most famous one used in the, that's a fictive ring of stones, are depicted as markers or beacons left by an alien force. I was very interested in the use of these megalithic sites, and they appear several times in different programs, different TV programs of the period. You have the Stone Tape, which is also written by the same author as Quatermass, Nigel Keane, and you have Children of the Stones. That's just 3 examples which are using the same imagery, which seems interesting to me, and that's why I've used the same imagery in my pictures. The series suggests that these sites are not simply historical relics, but are imbued with a mysterious and potentially dangerous significance, linking them to extraterrestrial activities and ancient events that have shaped history. What's interesting, and Mark Fisher talks about this in his book, The Weird and the Eerie, where he writes about this Quatermass series and Nigel Keane. Fisher says the initial symbolism of these stones has rotted away, revealing the ancient past to be an alien civilization. And that's an interesting thought from Fisher, to think that the meaning has rotted away, so that civilization itself has become alien to us in the contemporary space. In an earlier version of Quatermass, one of the earlier depictions, this was both a film and a TV series, 1958 and 9, the discovery of an alien spacecraft profoundly affects the character's understanding of history. Professor Quatermass concludes that millions of years ago, aliens abducted and genetically modified pre-humans. This revelation suggests that much of human history stems from this alien intervention. The spacecraft's influence reveals a hidden legacy within humanity, challenging the characters to reconsider human evolution and history as influenced by extraterrestrial forces, reshaping their perception of the past and the implications for the present and the future. And that in that we ourselves are aliens. I'm not saying that this is I'm not buying into an alien conspiracy theory or that we were actually cross-fertilized with aliens. It's a very interesting way of thinking what it is that we are as humans. So with this, we begin to see the world in which we live is more strange than we had imagined, and actually question what it is to be human. What I mean by this is when we're thinking about AI, when we're thinking about different forms of intelligence, what is it that makes us special as humans? Spinoza said it was intent. So you could say that a river has agency in that it moves and creates and has effect. But does a river have intent? Does it have this kind of, what Bach would say, an agent that cares? That's debatable. But when I bring in the idea of that we're software, plants and ecosystems can also be software programs running on different substrates, then we do begin to question what it is that makes a human. And one last quote, it doesn't matter if you don't believe in monsters. What does matter is that they believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here I am again. So thank you so much for this time traveling, illuminating talk, Adrian. I'm pretty sure all the audience also appreciates all these references. At the same time, was an aesthetic travel, was a political history travel, was different things at the same time. I would just play. I think I can open for questions. It was really good your talk, and I'm pretty sure you there are lots of people, just feeding the thoughts of all the audience. You asked me to play the video at the very last. So just want to you quickly connect this video because there's many references from Prodigy, which is a British band, and the sample and sampling images. What's the difference between this video and your work that you do with the? Sorry, it was just I'll play just quickly and then we can reflect on this. Oh, sorry, everybody. So I think I'm receiving notes and no sounds. I have no idea why it's not playing. Apologies for this. I think, yeah, I have no idea. But anyway, Adrian, if you just want to connect the idea of the video with your own borrowing of different images. And just for those who missed the video, and then this presentation will be available afterwards, you can hear the sounds. It's just a collection of sounds borrowed by Prodigy, the band, which has spanned several decades in music history. And then this is just a way of showing borrowing from different sources. Adrian, yourself, so what does it, how does it connect to your work?
So the idea of the talk really was to, as I said at the beginning, introduce various ideas which are orbiting the project, coming together. The way I work is that I don't start off with a definite idea or philosophical framework. So I continue to make work, and then the ideas and the themes emerge from the work itself. And the work itself reveals itself to me as I'm making it. And I generally try and follow the ideas that come out of the work. I mean, obviously, the ideas are within somewhere within me that I've experienced, Godard films, music, philosophy, TV series, and then they come together in the work. The Prodigy I found when I thought about it and I found this video, I thought, oh, that's a very good kind of visual example. This is the second Prodigy album. There are two probably important Prodigy albums in music history. This is the first, Music for the Jilted Generation, was followed by the much more commercially successful Fat of the Land. Both of them have the same approach, that the songs or the tracks are made up entirely of different samples, which are then slightly altered, changed, sped up, slowed down, changed a certain way, and then they come together, like Deleuze says, different blocks of information amalgamated then to form something new. And that kind of, in a way, it symbolizes very basically what I'm doing with my work. It is an amalgamation of found images and personal photographs, layered in such a way, very similar, altered, changed, in order to try and express the themes that I'm interested in. One example, for example, some of the pictures are taken from 1950s, early 60s American, what do you call them, public information films, generally informing, you might say, if you're being generous, people about the threat of nuclear extermination. Most famously, one being Duck and Cover, which, or not to leave us out of it, we had a similar pamphlet called Protect and Survive, which more or less told you to whitewash your windows with paint and hide under the stairs in the cupboard, as if that would make a difference. So it's kind of taking bits of what you might call propaganda, and I've used bits of American. It was interesting that the big corporations, even in the 50s, made kind of very long promotional films. All of these are taken from the Internet Archive. It's a very good resource. And then I've manipulated them and then kind of feed them back into the system for my own purposes, which is not so much making a statement as asking questions, but also a critique of both a critique of the contemporary spectacle, but also a questioning. But in Deleuzian terms, it's always moving. As an artist, in order to avoid being categorized, classified, and therefore commodified, you're always changing shape, like a shapeshifter.
Yeah, I see that. I absolutely identify with this as well. Like you're always trying to get the next thing. But just before we finish, we have only 5 minutes, around 5 minutes. I wonder if there is any question from the audience. Anyone wants to pose a question to Adrian Saker before we go? questions, anyone? If there is no questions, I have a question, Adrian, for us, or drop in the chat box if you wish, anyone, so I can, or even email them to us afterwards. But my final question to you, Adrian, is, was it absolutely great conversation, covering so much, there's so much to debunk in every single thing you said, all the historical periods and so on. But how do you see perception today? So how do, in your opinion, have we changed perception? You talk about the high precision, you talked about all these adjustments that we had over the decades, and the ways of perceiving images is influenced by capitalism, by television, by governments, by everything. But how do you see today our perception age of AI? Do you think there's a change, or are we still the same eyes that's seeing all those images that you collect from the 70s?
The short answer to that would be, that's quite a deep question. The short answer would be no. We are completely different. The brain and perception is like a difference engine which continually updates and continually remodels. It's what the neurologist David Eagleman would call wetware. The brain is not in a state of any kind of fixed state. It is always in process, which is a bit like Deleuzean metaphysics, which is a metaphysics of process, which everything is already and always moving. Deleuze uses Bergson and actually writes a book on Bergson, and there's one very good quote which sums it up. It would say that there's no such thing as form. Form is a snapshot of transition. So our perception is always altering because we're always remodeling the reality around us, creating new models and updating it. So very much tying back to looking back at the megalithic stones and the how Fisher said the previous, we've lost any kind of connection with that prehistoric era. They are alien to us. If you look back at the 1950s, particularly from this distance, it would seem that almost like an alien world, I think, in terms of how people perceive the world around them, how they react, how they're
just to finish, sorry to break you, but just to finish, as we have a few minutes. So what's our position as creators today in the system of this changing, that there's no form, there's just this changing landscape? What should we do in a very nutshell? How would you say about what's up to us as creators to produce today?
That in itself, I don't think has changed. You have to react to, you don't have to, but you react to the environment around you, whatever stimulates you in a form of what interests you, what questions, what do you think needs questioning, what draws you in, what annoys you, what baffles you, what would you like to comment on? But in doing that, in creating a body of work, don't make it entirely restrictive. So it's not like you can see that this represents this. Once it's codified, as I draw a picture of a cup and you know it's a cup, then there's no more traction in it. It's like if I tell you a joke and it's a one-line joke. If I tell you it again, you might be kind, but if I tell you it a third time, you'll get a bit, annoyed by it because it won't have any traction. So you try and create something that's multifaceted, multi-leveled, has these various ideas which continually orbit the work itself. Derrida calls it like endless supplementarity. Deleuze would say it's a kind of as I say, a metaphysics of process, or nomadic. Like a desert, if you walk across the desert and then stay on the other side for a while and then come back, it's still the desert, but the desert will have changed shape and form. And so that's like a Deleuzian concept. It's still a concept, but it's always changing. And that's the kind of thing that should be thinking about when making a body of work.
Brilliant. Perfect. And I'm so sorry to really interrupt. It's quite a nice chain of thoughts. And I'm pretty sure everybody is taking notes to develop this. And I'm very happy to talk about this, continue to talk about this in classroom. So for today, thank you so much, Adrian, for your availability, your generosity to talk to us, and your absolutely brilliant chain of thoughts over this hour. So it took very, very little. When I said, oh my God, it's already 6 p.m., so we got to go. But anyway, everybody, thank you so much for your attendance, for your participation today. And I will see you soon. And thank you very much once again, Adrian. So I've got to say goodbye now.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Cheers. Bye. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.